Hello, everybody. I'll be joined in a minute or two with my colleagues from Indiana and Michigan. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for being part of this experiment virtually. We're doing the best we can in this situation. A little bit about Ohio, where we are at the moment. Clearly, we're driven by the same phenomenon that everybody else is dealing with the virus. The governor said yesterday that it's official that the virus is everywhere in Ohio. It's all over our rural counties, our heavily populated counties, the cities. It's everywhere. If you look at the counties across Ohio, it really has permeated every neighborhood and every community in this state, and that's driving the economy. Another sort of bad news is that we're starting to see more permanent unemployment. Some have come back, but the rate is sort of staying the same, around 7.5%, 8%. There's a story in today's Columbus Dispatch about the economy here in Columbus, which has been pretty resilient, frankly, through all of this, that we're starting to see some, a more significant displacement in employment. It's not coming back as fast as we would like it, and that's having effect on the city's budget. So a big issue for next year will be how local governments deal with less tax revenue and other effects that we're having with unemployment and real estate displacement. There's a lot of issues that are going to affect us. With regard to telecommunications issues in Ohio, we are unfortunately stuck in a problem that you may have also read about. We've had an unprecedented scandal in Ohio. Let's just put it out there. Our speaker was arrested earlier this year, and it has essentially ground everything to a halt. There's been no significant legislative progress since this development in the fall. We have a bill that House Bill 13 that will create a broadband expansion program in Ohio, which we need, which we hope to get through the Senate in lame duck session. But frankly, everything is at a bit of a standstill right now. So we're in the midst of that because of where we are in the process. So it's the scandal revolves around a utility bailout. And without getting into that, the effect of that is that many of the legislators that voted for that particular bill and supported the bill are now, in the committees that we care about that are dealing with broadband expansion. The commission, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, was involved in House Bill 6, the bailout bill. So everything is now colored or clouded by this particular issue, and it's really stopped any progress that we've been trying to make. So it's affected not only the legislature, but it's affected the regulatory agency as well, the executive branch. On the good news side of this, I think the pandemic has put a spotlight on what we do. Everybody knows that broadband is absolutely critical to our current situation and to where we're going in the future. So that's the upside of all of this. We don't need to convince anybody anymore that this is necessary. It's a matter of designing a program that makes sense for Ohio. Our neighbors to the west just spent $100 million on broadband expansion in Indiana. And Ohio is still struggling to figure out its own broadband expansion plan. We had $50 million dedicated from the CARES Act to hotspots and tablets, which are great, but hotspots are not a permanent investment in the infrastructure, which is what we really need. So I'm still optimistic that we're going to pass House Bill 13, the broadband expansion bill. It should happen in lame duck session, but those sessions are typically overblown and not as much happens as possible. We're working on it. There's an interested party meeting tomorrow that we'll be involved in to help move that bill forward. But that's the That's the key for us, is to get this program established, get our own funding going. And then I think we're going to see next year, regardless of the election, whoever wins nationally, I think you're going to see a lot more dollars spent on broadband to get us through the pandemic, and to invest in a network that will have to change. There'll be more online learning because of this. More people are going to work from home because of this. Businesses are going to do different things because of all this, and the network's going to have to be robust and flexible enough to deal with that. So to me, that is our challenge here. It's one that everybody shares, but frankly, in Ohio's case, we have to get out of our own way here, get this program established, and get going with further broadband expansion in areas that the companies can't cover. The last thing I'll say on this, and maybe it's something we can talk about as a group, or down the road, but I think when these state and federal programs that invest public dollars into the network, whatever that might be, is something we should be quite aware of what goes along with that. And I believe that will be more oversight and potential regulation of how we spend those dollars. What is the standard for broadband going forward? It's not 10.1. Is it 25.3? Is it something greater than that? Those are policy issues we're going to have to answer. But if there's public money involved in getting there, there's probably going to be some strings attached to that. And that, I think, is a challenge for all of us moving forward. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to my colleague in Indiana, Neil Krevda.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay, good. Well, ditto on everything Charlie said for the state of Ohio. Very similar in Indiana in most cases, but I'll touch on some of the issues that we have somewhat kind of different, I guess. But with regard to the pandemic, Indiana is like all the other states. We actually are in stage 5 of what I would call a recovery mode, where we are open for business. The governor's monitoring it daily, all the health information. We get an executive order, I think every Wednesday. We'll probably be watching it very closely because all the cases are up in Indiana right now, and it could possibly change what stage we're going to be in. We could actually back up. But our schools are in session. They've done a lot of broadband and education virtually. We're doing pretty well there. A couple of schools have had to actually, slow that down and go to half classes and things of that. But actually, we're doing pretty well. The governor has asked for all the agencies to cut 15% out of their budgets going into 2021 to try to make room for what they foresee as a shortfall in the financials. We were very strong financially as a state going into this, with unemployment and that. We have spent a lot of money, but we are going into our legislative session, which is a full-blown long session for Indiana. A lot of meetings going on, special meetings, but what we are now, we are going to go in on the actual starting date in January. They're looking to use the state office building and some of its facility and the Capitol to actually have full-blown session. They'll have different hybrid type of testimonial areas and things like that for people to testify in committee. And they're talking about maybe moving some of the walls in some of the committee rooms and things of that nature. But a lot of planning going into it. But that's another one where Charlie touched on. The connectivity in the Capitol has always been good, but they never knew if it was good enough for this. So there's been a number of things that they're doing some work with, not only the wireless companies, but the landline companies to make sure there's the ability to make sure there's connectivity. Luckily, we had some late fall study committees. They're still having some this week where they're actually getting to test some of this. But at the end of the day, they're planning on coming in and going to work. Some of the issues we're going to have, and we've already had some meetings with legislators on these here, but they're going to look into lot of the pandemic issues as well, as far as, making sure that laws will effectively take care of people, as far as legal issues that may come up because of the pandemic, safety, the economics of the pandemic, and then businesses and what they might have to do to help some of them out as well. We're required to have a balanced budget in a long session, so we must walk away with this with a balanced budget. Redistricting of all the maps in Indiana have to be accomplished during this period of time. And the key issues for our industry, they've been meeting, this is the fifth time or fourth time the 21st Energy Coalition has met. So the energy companies have to come away with an adoption of a new plan, which has involved all the commission folks, of course, and then legislative folks as well. And that may play into some of the things that we may be doing here in the state as well, such as middle mile access through the electrics and that type of thing. Broadband, we're going to still, we do that. The governor did put forth $100 million a year and a half ago. 75 of that has been granted, along with all the federal monies that are out there. So broadband will still be an issue in Indiana. I think there's going to be people that want to look at a fund and somehow to have a fund that would put more money available. We've got issues with right-of-way with NDOT that will probably be an issue here in Indiana. 5G is going to be an issue in Indiana, and then anything that might come up in the tax arena or any of the business areas of the state. So those are kind of the big items that legislatively we will be looking at. Couple of other topics that I had down. A lot of the rural areas of Indiana look like Ohio and Michigan, where the schools, they had access, but not as good as they needed. So that's become an issue. We do have some of the CARES Act money that's been put into the Department of Education. A lot of that has already been granted as well. But what I'm leading up to there is construction has to take place. Now we're starting to see in a couple of the sessions I've been involved in, we're talking, fibers out 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Some of the other technical equipment that's needed is out even farther than that. So that's going to be an issue that I get asked a lot from at least the administration about how far and how quickly we can build out. So that'll be something that will probably be coming up in a session, but probably be more of a discussion point on what they can help us with to maybe possibly get equipment in quicker, or is it something that can be shared? I don't know, but there'll be a lot of questions on that. Indiana, we've also got 10-digit dialing that's coming up in 2 of the area codes because of some of the shifts in the Fed side. So that's going to be addressed, but not at the legislative level, just be addressed. And then the other thing Charley touched on, local government issues. We're going to have a number of those during this session and probably throughout the year. We have a number of local governments that, they feel like they've been stepped on and now their right-of-ways are being taken away. And so all of that is, in a nutshell, it leads to a big thing in Indiana and a big session and a big year. But at the same time, as far as legislation goes, if the pandemic would happen to hit the State House, I don't think anyone has an answer of where we go except to delay until we can get the answers and get the people healthy, because there's been a number of discussions about voting and that type of thing. So that's about all from me, and I'll pass it over to my good friend up in Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to piggyback on the comments of my 2 fellow presenters. First, talk a little bit about broadband related activities in Michigan. Earlier this year, Michigan passed what had been House Bill 4288, a broadband competitive bidding grant program to institutionalize what had been a single year program as part of an appropriation bill. It will make funds available for competitive bidding to deploy 25.3 in unserved areas. We were able to have prohibitions in there on the use of, or the availability of any government entities to receive these funds for bidding. So it'll be available only to private enterprise to deploy broadband. There are a couple of other bills that haven't gotten much traction yet that would provide property tax credits or sales and use tax credits for broadband equipment purchases and deployment. Remains to be seen whether they will get any action or not during this legislative session. Michigan did pass a budget bill. It relies heavily on some federal funding as a plug-in. They have kind of punted down the road the issues of what will be permanent funding for state, for local government expenditures for all the COVID-related precautions and that kind of thing. But we do have a budget, and we've moved beyond that. You've probably seen in the news, the biggest news in Michigan in the last month has been the arrest of the conspirators in the now up to 14 defendants in this conspiracy to kidnap Governor Whitmer and potentially to attack the state capitol. So it's making, understandably making headlines. Most of the Michigan defendants have been so far denied bond and are behind and are incarcerated at this point. The Michigan Capitol is open and there has been legislative activity. One issue that has surfaced in a wave of protests going back into the spring when Michigan had the first shutdown orders, a number of the demonstrators came into the Capitol. Michigan is an open carry state, so a number of the protesters came in carrying M16s and AK-47s as they're walking through the halls of the Capitol. And there is a committee that controls the administration of the Capitol building, and it is considering and has not taken any action yet on whether it's going to ban the presence of firearms in the Capitol. It's clearly a political hotbed issue, and I think they're trying to punt it down the road to get at least past the election to see what happens as far as that's concerned. So it's a bit intimidating if you're walking around the Capitol during one of these days that the protesters are there packing the weapons and just kind of rattling the sabers, so to speak, of people around the Capitol. The other big thing, Governor Whitmer had relied upon a couple of Michigan statutes to issue a whole variety of executive orders numbering more than 150, requiring various precautions and shutdown procedures to deal with COVID-19. The Michigan Supreme Court found that the principal statute on which she relied was unconstitutional. So they're in effect requiring her and the legislature to try to negotiate what would be a framework for continuing various precautions and procedures regarding COVID-19. As a stopgap measure, the governor is relying upon authority in the state health code, and the Department of Health and Human Services has issued a number of health orders relying on different authority that largely parallel what had been her executive orders, and those will likely come under legal challenge also. So Michigan has been a hotbed of activity at this point. That's it for Michigan for the time being.
Michael and Neil, I would just add from Ohio's perspective, just two things. Our state house is compromised too. It's a building that's almost, it's almost 200 years old at this point. It does not lend itself to spacing. We only have 3 or 4 different hearing rooms that we can use to properly space legislators and staff and lobbyists and the media and all that. So they have to stack hearings on top of one another in the same room. We did have some violence in Columbus, and there's still some broken windows and things they have not fixed. They're waiting till after the election to do that. But the State House is a very different place and very awkward and difficult to even hold session. Our House members, we have 99 House members, some of them have to sit outside the chamber actually to vote when they're in full session for the spacing requirements. So it's very unwieldy. They frankly have not worked through all that yet. The Senate's a little easier because there's a smaller number of people to deal with, but just the functioning of the legislative branch is really difficult at the moment. And we'll see how we do. If there's a further spread and this gets worse, it may even limit the kind of sessions that they hold, and we may have to go to some kind of remote or virtual sessions. That's not in the cards right now, but that's a possibility. And the second thing is that depending on the election, there's been a lot of debate too in Ohio about the governor's powers, what he or she can and can't do. There's some folks who are not happy with some of the methods he's used during the pandemic. If Donald Trump wins in Ohio, and many folks that support him, if there are new members that come in, I think you're going to see that debate continue pretty significantly about what the governor can and can't do in terms of their constitutional power. There's been a big fight back and forth about opening up the economy, masks, the whole deal. So we've had bills that he's vetoed here that have not been overridden on his power or her power. But that's something that if, depending on how the election goes, if it goes further to the right, you could see that become an issue where he can't override, where a veto of his could be overridden. And we could limit the power of the governor to deal with this or any other situation. So the Constitution itself, in some respects, is under review. And the election, I think, could have an impact on it.
Well, we could be looking at, I'm not going to try to look in my crystal ball in any of the election results, but there are 2 Michigan Supreme Court seats up for election. And if the 2 candidates that have been put up by the Democrats are elected, then it's conceivable that there could be a revisiting of the issues and some of the decisions that are underway. The decision that found the principal Michigan statute unconstitutional was a 4-3 decision, but with the 4 Republican justices in the majority. So that could quickly change after the election.
And in Indiana, as far as the elections go, we've got a lot of tight races. All 100 seats in the House are up and half of the Senate. So there are, as you can guess, nightly, every minute ads for everything from representative to the Senate to the governor's race to the congressional race, which we have one really tight congressional race, which is on the north side of Indianapolis, that has an open seat. So there is almost any race you want to look at, they're really close and could be too close to call. But at the end of the day, I think Indiana will be staying fairly Republican from top to bottom, but it may not be super majorities like we've had in recent past. So it'll be an interesting election night. A lot of people will be watching it. We've got a really close speaker who's a really good guy, but he's in a close race. And then there's just a number of other leaders that are in committees that are in tough races right now, at least as far as polling goes. So it'll be interesting to see how it ends up. But just, I guess depends on who goes to the polls, and we're already seeing early voting like everyone else. So it'll be interesting. That's all.
I think our expectation, at least the Michigan Secretary of State, who is the state official in charge of elections, is trying to downplay expectations of when the results will be out. And the current thinking is on statewide races, we may not have results for until 3 or 4 days after the voting is closed, by the time all the absentee ballots get counted. So they're trying to make it clear that we're not likely to know on election night the outcome of many races.
I think that's the same in Ohio. We're the conventional wisdom now is a couple days. If it's close on the top of the ticket. I don't. The Senate will remain Republican. The House will remain Republican. They might lose a couple seats in the House, maybe. The only change that we could have is our Supreme Court. There are 2 Democratic candidates that have a shot, but I think that depends on the top of the ticket. If Biden wins Ohio, then they probably have a good shot of winning those races. They aren't as publicized as most, but this will still remain a Republican state, regardless of whether Joe Biden wins the Ohio or not. I think we'll have the same leadership team with a change in the Senate president, but the Republican majorities will stay the same in the House and the Senate. We have got a couple minutes left. I don't see any questions. I'd like to remind everybody that the networking portion of this starts in a couple minutes. So please avail yourself of that, our speed dating application. And as well, there are prizes that the vendors themselves are giving out, and the telco person that goes to the most booths will get a prize as well. So we've got some stuff for you for the next couple of days, today and tomorrow, if you can make the rounds. That's what this is about, is making sure that you get in touch with the vendors and learn about their business and see if there's something that we can all learn from them. So I think we're close enough that I'm going to, by executive order, conclude this session, and we'll move straight to the networking. Thanks, everyone, for
Thank you.
being part of this.